It's really quite something to see how fast technology is changing our cities, isn't it? You see bits and pieces everywhere, but how does it all come together on a huge scale, strategically? Today, we're going to unpack a really fascinating look at how one country is doing it.
Absolutely. We're diving deep into Chapter 2 of Eduardo Moreno's Smart Cities, China's Model of Success. And we'll just call him Moreno from here on out. This chapter, it's all about the framework, basically the foundational stuff, the national strategies driving this whole transformation.
Exactly. And for you listening, maybe you want to get a good handle on complex stuff like this pretty efficiently. Our aim here is to pull out the really key insights from this chapter, give you a clear picture of what's actually powering China's smart city push without, getting totally bogged down in every single detail. So let's start there with the big picture. According to Moreno, what's really the engine behind this framework?
Well, Moreno makes it clear right away. The central government plays an incredibly significant role. What's really interesting, though, is that China's approach isn't just like a bunch of separate city projects happening randomly. No, it's this highly comprehensive, strategically designed national framework.
A national framework.
Yeah, and it's all about weaving together advanced tech, really thoughtful urban planning, and specific public policies so they all work in sync.
That makes a lot of sense. It's hard to picture something this massive working without that kind of top-level coordination. What were some of the big reasons Moreno points to for this top-down strategy?
Moreno highlights that the government recognized, actually quite early on, that smart city ideas could be powerful tools to tackle some really tough challenges from their super fast urbanization. Things like environmental degradation, the huge demand for resources, and just the sheer complexity of managing these enormous cities.
So it's really using tech to solve very concrete urban problems, not just for the sake of innovation itself.
Precisely. And a key part of this national strategy, Moreno really emphasizes this, is setting up very clear policy guidelines and objectives. This gives everyone across the whole country a sort of unified direction, a shared vision for where smart city development should be heading.
And Moreno actually gives us some specific examples of these big policy documents, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. He specifically points to the 13th five-year plan, that was 2016 to 2020, and the current one, the 14th five-year plan, running up to 2025. And what's really insightful, actually, is seeing the evolution between them. The 13th laid a lot of the digital groundwork, but the 14th, it's really doubled down on using the data and building this powerful digital economy within the smart cities. It's a subtle shift, but it tells you a lot about their long game.
Right.
These plans, they explicitly push for innovation-driven development and really deeply integrating ICT, information and communication technologies, into the nuts and bolts of city management.
So these plans aren't just vague ideas, they set real targets, like for improving infrastructure or making cities greener.
Exactly. Moreno notes they outline specific goals, things like major upgrades to urban infrastructure, transport, energy, the works, and a really strong push for green development, for sustainability within the cities.
Sounds like they're really trying to map out a concrete path.
Absolutely. And that path includes developing detailed guidelines and standards. Moreno stresses this point. The government isn't just saying, go be smart. They're creating specific, actionable guides on how to do it. Best practices for things like managing data responsibly, ensuring robust cybersecurity, and how to apply newer tech like AI and the Internet of Things thoughtfully.
Okay, so a strong central plan, clear goals, practical guidelines. What's another really key piece of this national strategy that Moreno talks about?
The next really crucial element is the government's strategic focus on pilot projects and creating these demonstration zones. Moreno explains that instead of trying to, slip a switch and make every city smart overnight, they designated specific cities as pilot sites first.
So these cities are basically laboratories, testing grounds for innovation.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, think of them as controlled environments, places where new tech, new ways of managing the city, different policy ideas, they can all be tested rigorously, evaluated carefully, in the real world.
And the idea is that what they learn there, the good and the bad, helps figure out how to do it better elsewhere.
Exactly that. Moreno emphasizes that the lessons learned, the best practices they figure out, even the challenges they run into in these pilot projects, they provide really critical insights that then shape how they roll out smart city solutions more broadly across the whole country.
Moreno mentioned some of the big ones, right? These pilot cities.
Yeah, he highlights Hangzhou, Shenzhen, and also Xiang'an, that sort of visionary new city they're building. He briefly mentions that each one, in its own way, has become a kind of model that other cities in China are looking at and learning from.
Okay, so central plan, guidelines, pilot projects acting as real-world experiments. Now, all of this takes resources. What about the money, the financing?
Moreno really underlines this. Financing and investment are absolutely critical parts of the strategy. It's not just about having good ideas. You need the substantial resources to actually make them happen.
And where's that funding coming from, mainly?
He points to significant chunks of money being allocated by both the central government and local governments, so a strong public sector commitment. But, importantly, it's not just government money. Moreno also highlights how the government actively encourages public-private partnerships, PPPs.
Ah, PPP is always a key factor in these big infrastructure plays.
Exactly. The idea is to bring in the private sector's specialized know-how, their tech, and, of course, their capital. By forming these partnerships, the government can really speed up the development of sophisticated smart city infrastructure and services. Think of it like maybe the government provides the land or regulatory support, and a tech company builds and runs the actual platform.
Sharing the risk and the reward, basically.
Precisely. And Moreno also notes the significant role played by some of the big state-owned enterprises, especially when it comes to implementing the really large-scale infrastructure projects that are, the foundation for a lot of this.
Now, with all this tech, all this data flying around, security must be a huge concern. What does Moreno say about data governance and cybersecurity in this national strategy?
Yeah, that's a major focus. Moreno stresses the strong emphasis they place on setting up robust data governance frameworks. Basically, clear rules for how all the data generated by these smart systems is collected, stored, managed, shared, and crucially, how it's kept secure and used ethically.
So clear guardrails for handling all that valuable information.
Exactly. And tied right into that is integrating strong cybersecurity measures. Moreno emphasizes that protecting these complex systems from cyber threats is like a top priority woven into the whole national strategy.
Okay, so looking at all these pieces together, the central government's role, the clear policies, the pilot projects, the funding, the focus on data security, how does Moreno kind of sum up the success of these national strategies overall?
Moreno concludes that China's national strategy is definitely marked by this very structured, multi-layered approach. He brings together those key elements we've talked about: the clear policies giving direction, the pilots for learning, the significant funding making it possible, and the strong data governance for security and trust.
And the bottom line, is it working?
Moreno's assessment is that you can really see the transformative impact in cities across China. He suggests the positive changes happening are strong evidence that this comprehensive national approach is, well, largely successful, and maybe even setting a kind of global benchmark for how to do this.
Okay, that gives us a really solid grasp of the national strategies part of Moreno's framework. Now, he also digs into government roles, how the different levels of government actually make this happen. Let's start at the top. The central government's specific job in all this.
Moreno explains the central government is really pivotal in a few key ways. First, obviously, setting the big picture policies. Second, providing a lot of the crucial funding. And third, establishing those nationwide standards we talked about, which helps ensure things work together and meet a certain quality level.
So setting the direction and providing the horsepower, essentially.
Pretty much. He mentions again how important those national plans are, like the National New Type Urbanization Plan and that 13th National Informatization 5-Year Plan. They're the tools used to communicate the central vision and spell out requirements.
And they're also putting their money where their mouth is, investing directly.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Moreno underscores the central government's direct financial support and also how they actively promote R&D. This often means setting up special funds or offering grants specifically designed to spur innovation in smart city tech and solutions.
Okay, now what about the local level, the cities themselves? What's their role in making these national plans a reality?
This is crucial. Moreno stresses that while the central government sets the framework, it's the local governments that are responsible for the actual on-the-ground implementation. They're the ones who have to take those national strategies and adapt them, tailor them to their own city's specific situation, the unique challenges, the local needs, the opportunities they have.
So they translate the national blueprint into local action.
Exactly. And Moreno also highlights another really important role for them: engaging citizens, fostering public participation in the planning and the decision-making. making sure the smart city solutions actually meet the needs and have the support of the people living there.
It sounds like a really carefully balanced dance between the central and local levels. How does Moreno describe that relationship, that synergy?
He calls it a well-defined and crucially a highly synergistic relationship. It's all about playing to each level's strengths, right? The central government provides the big strategy, the resources, the standards. The local governments bring that deep understanding of local context and the ability to actually execute effectively on the ground.
And it's this teamwork that makes creating these advanced, sustainable cities possible.
Absolutely. Moreno sort of recaps the key government functions that make it work. Policy making up top, financing flowing down, standardization keeping things compatible, implementation happening locally, and that vital citizen engagement piece tying it all together.
We mentioned them earlier, but Moreno seems to really emphasize public-private partnerships again when talking about government roles. Why are they so important in this Chinese model?
Yeah. He comes back to them because the central government actively promotes PPPs. They see it as a strategic way to tap into all that specialized knowledge, the cutting-edge tech, and importantly, the investment capital that exists in the private sector.
And he gives some examples of big tech companies involved, right?
Yes, he specifically mentions major players like Alibaba, Huawei, Tencent. He points out how they partnered with different levels of government to co-develop and roll out a whole range of smart city solutions.
Things like digital payments, smart traffic systems.
Exactly. Those kinds of collaborations have been really key in creating innovative apps and services that people actually use and benefit from in their daily lives in these cities.
Now, is this policy implementation just set in stone, or is there a feedback loop, a way to learn and adapt?
Oh, definitely iterative.
Mm-hmm.
Moreno emphasizes that. He points back to those pilot projects, again, calling them crucial testing grounds. They use them to evaluate new tech, new methods, and that allows for, real-time adjustments based on how things are actually performing.
So constantly checking, learning, tweaking the approach based on results.
Precisely. And to track those results, Moreno highlights how they establish key performance indicators, KPIs. These are used to measure how well different smart city initiatives are doing. Things like improvements in energy efficiency, reductions in traffic congestion, even levels of public satisfaction with services.
And those metrics feed into reviews and potential course corrections.
Yes. Moreno mentions regular audits and assessments. They use these to track progress against the KPIs and to spot any areas needing improvement. It's a very data-driven approach to keep things on track and foster continuous improvement.
It also sounds like they're investing in people, not just technology. What about building up the skills needed, capacity building?
That's another key point Moreno makes. He emphasizes the focus on training programs for government officials, for urban planners, for the technical staff who are actually building and managing these systems. The goal is to make sure they have the necessary skills and knowledge in this really fast-moving field.
And it's not just internal training.
No. He also mentions platforms for knowledge sharing, things like conferences, workshops, places where people from different cities and regions can share best practices, talk about new solutions, and just generally learn from each other.
Okay, so pulling this section on government roles together, what's Moreno's overall take on how effectively this structure works?
Moreno concludes that the success really comes down to this structured, multi-layered approach. It combines that central oversight and resource allocation with local adaptability and execution. He reiterates that it's the strategic planning, the PPPs, the iterative development, the strong monitoring, all working together that allows for the effective integration of smart tech and positions China as a leader here.
All right, that brings us to the final, really critical piece of this foundational framework from Chapter 2, funding and investments. Clearly, this kind of transformation doesn't come cheap. So let's dig into where the money comes from.
Moreno starts by, stating the obvious. Significant financial support comes directly from the government, both central and local, pouring into these smart city projects. It's a major ongoing commitment of public funds.
And are they using financial tools to encourage more investment from others too?
Absolutely. Moreno points out they use things like subsidies and specific tax incentives. These are designed pretty strategically to encourage more investment in the smart city sector from, various players.
And here they are again, public-private partnerships. How do they fit into the funding picture specifically?
Moreno really hammers home that PPPs are a cornerstone of the funding strategy too. They're seen as absolutely crucial for bringing in more investment and also for sharing the pretty substantial financial load of these big projects between the public and private sectors.
So the local government might chip in some seed money or regulatory help, and the private company brings tech and more capital.
That's the synergy Moreno describes. He emphasizes how effective this model has been in speeding up both the implementation and the scaling of smart city solutions across China. It just makes things happen faster and often bigger.
Beyond government money and PPPs, are there other important funding sources Moreno identifies?
Yes, he definitely highlights the growing role of venture capital and private equity firms. These investors, they see the huge potential in China's smart city market, right?
Yeah.
So they've been putting significant money into tech startups focused on key areas like AI, IoT, big data analytics, the enabling technologies.
So private investors see this as a major growth opportunity.
Exactly. Marino notes this influx of venture capital has been a real catalyst for innovation, really helping to fuel the development of some cutting-edge, specialized smart city solutions.
Are they also getting creative with financing, maybe beyond the usual routes?
That's right. Moreno talks about the rise of more innovative financing mechanisms. He gives the specific example of green bonds. These have been used successfully to raise money specifically for sustainable urban projects, attracting investors who particularly want to back environmentally friendly initiatives.
Interesting. Now, something that can really affect costs in big tech projects is standardization. Does Moreno talk about how they manage costs from that angle?
He does. Moreno explains that by pushing for standardized communication protocols and interoperable frameworks, basically, making sure different systems can talk to each other easily, they streamline data sharing and system integration. This boosts efficiency and, yeah, can potentially bring down overall costs quite a bit.
It's about making sure the traffic sensors can talk to the transit system without needing expensive custom work, essentially.
Precisely. And Moreno also comes back to the point that involving experts and bringing in private investment doesn't just bring money in tech, it also helps ease the direct financial strain on public budgets.
Sounds like a really layered and strategic financial game plan. And finally, with sustainability being such a theme, is funding actively going towards green initiatives?
Yes, Moreno's analysis clearly indicates a strong integration of green tech and sustainable practices throughout the framework. It strongly suggests that, yeah, a good chunk of the funding is being deliberately channeled towards these environmentally focused projects and goals.
So, wrapping up this whole section on funding and investment, what's the main takeaway from Moreno's analysis?
Moreno concludes that China uses this really diverse, really comprehensive funding strategy to power its smart city ambitions. It's a strategic mix, significant government support, actively encouraging PPPs, tapping into venture capital, and using innovative financing like green bonds, all these pieces working together.
So, let's recap our deep dive into Chapter 2 of Eduardo Moreno's Smart Cities, China's Model of Success. We've really unpacked the core foundations of their approach. We looked at that comprehensive national framework, the clear policy goals driving it, the vital collaborative roles of central and local governments, and just now, the diverse funding strategies fueling this whole massive urban shift.
Yeah, Moreno's analysis really drives home the sheer scale, but also the highly strategic planned nature of China's approach. It's definitely impressive in its coordination and ambition.
And for you listening, hopefully this deep dive into Chapter 2 gives you that structured understanding we aimed for the fundamental pieces without getting lost. You should have a pretty solid grasp now of the framework underpinning China's smart city efforts.
Which kind of leads to a final thought for you to chew on. When you look at this very centralized approach with such heavy government involvement in China's framework, what do you think are the potential long-term upsides and maybe the downsides compared to more decentralized, perhaps more market-led models you see elsewhere in the world?
That's a really interesting question to ponder. As you think about that, consider the implications for things like innovation, for citizen participation, and of course, the always important questions around data privacy. Until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep questioning.